On today's episode, we have Eric Chaya. We discuss his journey to regenerative rancher and the regenerative grazing open air lab that he's working on. It is a proof of concept within the U.S. Army. So it's very interesting, so you'll want to listen. We'll get started with the Fast Five. What is your name?
Eric Chaya.
And Eric, what's your farm's name?
We call it the Regenerative Grazing Open Air Lab.
Very interesting. And that should hook a lot of people. Wait till we talk about it later.
Yeah. Great acronym, our goal.
Yes, it is. Makes it easy to remember, or at least remember the acronym.
That's right.
Then you got to think about it, the words in there. Where are you located?
We are in San Luis Obispo, California.
And what species do you graze, or what livestock do you graze?
It is cow-calf pairs. So we graze about 140 pairs, primarily Black Angus.
Oh, very good. And when did you start grazing animals?
I started back in 2018 is when we started, very much on the homesteading level of,
yes.
a few cows, had turkeys, had pigs, had chickens. Right now we're strictly doing the cattle.
Welcome to the Grazing Grass Podcast, the podcast dedicated to sharing the stories of grass-based livestock producers and exploring regenerative practices that improve the land, animals, and our lives. I'm your host, Gal Hardage, and each week we'll dive into the journeys, challenges, and successes of producers like you, learning from their experiences and inspiring each other to grow and graze better. Whether you're a seasoned grazer or just getting started, this is the place for you. You're growing more than grass. You're growing a healthier ecosystem to help your cattle thrive in their environment. You're growing your livelihood by increasing your carrying capacity and reducing your operating costs. You're growing stronger communities and a legacy to last generations. The grazing management decisions you make today impact everything from the soil beneath your feet to the community all around you. That's why the Noble Research Institute created their Essentials of Regenerative Grazing course to teach ranchers like you easy-to-follow techniques to quickly assess your forage production and infrastructure capacity in order to begin grazing more efficiently. Together, they can help you grow not only a healthier operation, but a legacy that lasts. Learn more on their website at noble.org/grazing. It's noble.org/grazing. For my 10 seconds today, last week I went to the Okie Homesteading Conference in Pryor, Oklahoma. Lots of people there. Is very interesting. I enjoyed it. I also got to talk with Todd and Carson from Redmond. I really appreciate the conversation and spending time with them. I did indulge myself a little bit and got a chocolate cheesecake on a stick. Way too much food, but it was really good. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get back to Eric. Eric, getting started growing up, did you grow up with livestock?
No, not at all. I grew up in town. I grew up in Wisconsin, so...
Oh, land of cheese.
Yeah. I'm a cheesehead, definitely a Packer fan. But we saw a lot of, typical dairy operations, confinement dairy operations, and you drove past them and you didn't want to spend any longer at them, but we all baled hay, baled alfalfa in the summer. We cleaned stalls and gutters in the summer to have that summer income. So I wanted to kind of get away from it as far as I could, actually.
I understand that. So did you get out of high school and go into the military?
Yeah, well, right out of high school, I did ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps. In college. So they'll pay for your college. That was kind of the deal. My parents encouraged me to go, but said, you got to find a way to pay for it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it turns out the
And that
Army,
ROTC works out good for that.
it was great. Yeah, it was great. I don't think I would have graduated without ROTC because they're also a little bit of a big brother kind of mentoring you throughout that time and making sure I kept my head on and graduated so I could commission. And then you start off as an officer. You start off as a second
Oh,
lieutenant
yes.
in the Army. Yep.
What was your major in college?
Oh, criminology and law studies is what
Oh,
I majored
yes.
in. Interesting,
Yeah.
but I just didn't wanna take math. I was just
Oh, yeah.
running away from math courses.
Try to avoid the math. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. So you go into the military. When did you get interested into regenerative ag?
It wasn't until we had I suppose I'd been in the Army for about 8 years, and we were looking at putting down some roots. We move around quite a bit, but
Oh, yes.
we figured that in Fort Bragg, North Carolina is where we could stay for a while. It's interesting. People call it homesteading when you stay at a station for a while. And
Oh, yes.
there's so many, Fort Bragg has so many units at it that it's conducive to just kind of bouncing from one unit to another without having to pick up and, the kids can kind of get into a community,
Oh,
spouse
yes.
gets friends. And so it's kind of a cool spot where you can stay. And so we bought some property and it was just a bunch of scrub oaks and spindly pine trees, like not even pulpwood pine trees, that's
Oh, yes.
you could barely walk through it. And turns out like equipment is pretty expensive, heavy equipment to come out and do some clearing. So I was out there with my chainsaw, just about clearing all I could just to get some wire in there,
Oh, yes.
so I could bring in pigs, so they could do some clearing. I had a friend who had some Ossabaw hogs, and he said, "Oh, these will do a great job. We can sprinkle some cracked corn down there by the base of some of these pine trees, and they'll uproot them for you." So that's kind of how we really started. Was I just wanted to clear some land so I could have shooting lanes. Actually, that's
Oh,
really,
yes.
really what I wanted. I'd be able to. I had a berm out there, and I thought, oh, I get some shooting lanes, and pigs will do it for me, and then we'll have a bunch of pork in the freezer.
So when you bought that land, was that the main goal? You thought, gives me an outdoor area, I can do some shooting,
That was
and then
really
the
yeah,
pigs were kind of the solution to, or
exactly. Well, it was
the method to your solution. Yeah.
yeah, and then it was just kind of cool because we had used those pigs, and then we had a lot of ticks, and chiggers, and a lot of mosquitoes, and a lot of other insects, and we thought, well, chickens could kind of just patrol the house. We just get some chickens and then I started cutting down more trees and we started growing all this grass. And I thought I didn't really want to mow all this grass.
Yeah. Created more work for you.
Yeah. I'm like, what am I doing here? Let's get some cows out here to start eating some of this grass. So it's kind of like these one things just kind of led to another.
Yeah. It's kind of like that chicken math deal.
Yeah, exactly. My
Yes.
wife loved it. Right before I would leave on a trip or something like that, I'd leave her with a present, to remind me of it, whether it was a cow or a pig,
Oh, yes.
new
Yeah.
flock of chickens. I was, yep, all right, I'm leaving in a few days. See you later.
There you go. On those first journeys into livestock,
Hmm.
were you raising them all for your own consumption at that time,
Yeah.
or did you sell some out?
We really were just raising for our own. It wasn't until about like year
Oh, yeah.
three. I think it was year three. It was when we started, enough friends and neighbors had been like, we want some of this. And,
Oh, yes.
I kind of was like, wow, it was so, I mean, it meant a lot to me. I almost felt weird, like putting a dollar value to it, because I wasn't doing
Right.
it on scale, so then it
Yes.
started just being like, well, we'll raise one extra steer. Or, we'll instead of doing 2 hogs, we'll do 4, and we'll sell it to the neighbor just to cover the butcher and the feed,
Oh, yeah.
and so that's kinda how that's about as big as we got out there.
Yeah. Did you stick to just the hogs, the cattle, and some chickens?
We did turkeys, which we really enjoyed the
Excuse me.
turkeys. Just some of them didn't last as long as others depending on their temperament. You know,
Oh, yes.
some went a little bit quicker and maybe didn't last until Thanksgiving. Gosh, I'm trying to think of other things we did. That was really about it.
And
We
were you using some, like,
yep,
Salatin style chicken tractors, or
yeah.
did you just have them in a coop in a pen?
Well, the layers, just a coop that we moved very infrequently. Uh,
Oh, yeah.
but the chicken tractor for the meat birds, we moved that, every day.
Oh, yes.
We had a
Yeah.
really cool I actually a n a neighbor was selling a chicken track like one of those prefabbed, real
Oh,
nice
yes.
chicken tractors. I couldn't even remember the brand name of it, but it was awesome, you know? We used that, and that was really cool to see. In fact, there was a day where I was out of town, and so the chickens got left there for it was probably 2 or 3 days. And so I came back and I was like, "Hey, that needed to be moved." So I pick up, move them, and there's just like it looks like a black mat,
Oh, yeah.
of
Yeah.
of chicken manure and just matted grass. Well, the next year, I mean, that spot was like black green, that much nitrogen there. It was cool looking. It ended up being really
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
It didn't grow anything for a while, but once it did grow, it was pretty neat.
Oh, yeah, it's a little too hot at the beginning, but
Well,
boy, it took off after that.
pretty
Yeah, and chickens are great for that. As we move larger animals around, sometimes we don't see the benefit quite as much as just having some small chicken tractor out there and moving it daily. 2 weeks, you can just see each day's move. It's just crazy.
yeah. Yeah, it is. It's pretty gratifying,
It
right?
is,
You start
yes.
moving these, like when you get 100, 150, 200. I know there's people who are doing a whole lot more and doing bigger moves. You don't necessarily see that unless you're going to the poly wire, looking left and right,
Oh, yes.
looking down to see that change to give you some feedback. But yeah, it is. Those little chickens are great.
How they are. With your pigs and cattle, I know the cattle were a little bit later. Were you using electro netting and then polywire with your cows?
Well, for the pigs, we did actually poultry netting.
Oh, okay,
All I
poultry
used was
netting.
poultry
Yeah.
netting and never. I mean, we did. I wish I knew. I mean, probably. I mean, we did 5 seasons, 5 years. So what we'd do is we would get pigs. It was this in North Carolina, so I would wanna buy it, at the last frost is when I would buy the feeders and then try and have them finished out before just after Halloween when everyone was getting rid of their pumpkins. That was my
Oh,
next.
yes.
I'd go to all the neighbors and grab up all their pumpkins, feed them to the pigs, and that was their dewormer, a couple weeks as we get ready to go to the butcher, but the poultry netting was great, and we never had any issues with them getting out, except
Oh, very
for
good.
we had one Duroc. My daughters had named him Stinky Pete. We would sometimes, the fence would get turned off and not turned back on, and he was pretty smart, and he picked up with his mouth, picked up one of the fiberglass posts, laid it down, and he walked in. He was in the My wife opened the garage door, and he was in the garage eating chicken food,
Oh, yes.
but she was out, walked him right back in. But yeah, that was the only escape. Other than that, that poultry netting stuff was great.
Oh, yeah. And did you just have one roll of it that you were using?
No, we had quite a few rolls,
Yeah.
and then in between, we would run polywire. So 2 strands
Oh,
of
okay.
polywire to even, like, further subdivide the quote, unquote, "pasture." It was just the
Oh, yeah.
woods. That's where we put the pigs, was just in our all that pine all those piney woods.
Yeah. And that makes sense really when you going through any amount of trees and stuff. It'd be hard to just make a little pin with one roll to get it done.
Mm,
Yeah, you need
no.
a few rows. In fact, I told my wife earlier today, I really need a few more rows of electronetting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I don't
didn't tell
mind
her
I
the
don't mind
price.
putting them out. Oh, yeah, they're not cheap. I don't mind putting them out, moving them around, though, especially in the woods.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good exercise for your marriage. You and your wife out there. That's great.
That's a good exercise for meditation. I mean, man, we got enough trees with thorns out there,
Mhm.
and those thorns jump out and grab it.
Yeah.
But Yeah. Works on patience,
That's right.
on resilience. There's a whole list of things. It
Yeah.
improves. Well, let's take it back. I'm not sure it improves. It helps you work on it. It gives you an opportunity to
There you go.
improve.
It offers
Yeah.
you an opportunity. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, we call them wait a minute bushes.
Oh, yes. There you go.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, during this time, you were starting to see what your chickens' effect on your land was. You were seeing what the pigs were doing to the area. You brought in cows because the grass, you started having more grass.
Mm-hmm.
I can only assume that just caused you to dive deeper into this regenerative practice rabbit hole.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a lot of bad habits, you know? My
Oh, yeah.
wife had, my I shouldn't say bad habits. I didn't have a lot of institutional knowledge. My wife grew up on a dairy.
Right.
My wife grew up on a dairy, and when she was younger, this is just kind of what they did. It was a very grass-based dairy. It wasn't until much later and more visits from more and more salesmen did they go to much more of a conventional type operation.
Oh, yes.
So for us, I just yeah, I started, I'd read holistic management. I was listening to podcasts. I'd heard Dr. Alan Williams. I heard Gabe Brown. I read Dirt to Soil. I'd read Dirt to Soil when I was in Afghanistan. I'm like,
Oh, yes.
I'm reading these things. I'm like, wow, this is some incredible, incredible stuff. And it just seemed to really make sense to me. And I know we're going to get into this too, but when I would go, I worked in Africa, and it was like, this is how they managed their land in some cases,
Oh, yeah.
They weren't out there with polywire. It was kids with sticks, moving these
Oh,
cows
yes.
every single day. There's no set stock grazing, it's they're working with like other landowners or community areas where they're grazing through it. And so this all just kind of to me, it just made a whole lot of sense. So it was really enjoyable too. I thought
Oh, yes.
that was pretty neat.
Yeah. How long did you get to stay in North Carolina doing that? And then was the next step going to California?
Yeah, we were there for 6 years, and then we really thought we would stay there, and then
Oh, yeah.
I had an opportunity to go to the Naval Postgraduate School, which is in Monterey, California. And we thought, well, you know, there's not too many Army bases that are on the beach, like
Oh, yes.
the Navy tends to have a pretty good stronghold on those. And so it was a unique opportunity. I applied for it, didn't think I'd get in. Somehow I got in, and we thought, well, let's go try this. Let's go do something a little bit different for a year and a half, and then we'll hustle right back to North Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we thought. That's what we thought we would do.
So how long have you been in California now?
Oh, it has been almost 3 years now.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it is beautiful. Like, yeah, it is. It's a postcard out there. It is
Oh,
really unique.
I have not been there, but I'm sure. I've told this story, I believe, on the podcast before, but my wife's from Hawaii. I'm from Oklahoma.
Mm.
First time I went to Hawaii with her, she went ahead of me to see family, and she was there, I want to say 2 weeks before I went over. And I would be like, hey, send me some pictures. I want to see what it looks like.
Yeah,
And she was like, well, we didn't really do anything. We didn't go anywhere. We just ran to town. Nothing really to take a picture of. I'm like, okay. So next day I'd ask her again, you take some pictures for me?
yeah,
It's like, no, we were just out around the house, didn't really do anything. I'm like, okay. This goes on for 2 weeks and I fly over.
yeah.
Well, her dad picks me up at the airport and we go to their house. Standing on the driveway of her parents' driveway, standing on their driveway, I could look to the east and see the ocean. And I don't know if you've been to Oklahoma, but we don't have an ocean that close.
No, no.
You could look to the west and see a mountain.
Hmm.
I don't know if you've been to Oklahoma. We don't have a lot of mountains. We do have some, but not in the area I'm in.
Yep.
And then if you looked across the road at her neighbor's yard, there was a palm tree. We don't have those in Oklahoma, at least not in my area.
Yep.
like,
No.
all these opportunities.
Yeah.
So it was pretty it was a very pretty or beautiful area to go over there and visit and see that. I'm sure the area you're in has all that as
It
well.
it is beautiful. We always talk about, my wife and I say, if there's one spot that we wouldn't need to, prayerfully consider moving to, where we could just go, "Yeah, that of course we would move." It'd be Hawaii. It'd be
Oh,
Maui in
yeah.
particular. We
Oh,
really
yeah, and that's where she grew up,
Oh,
Maui.
unbelievable.
Y
Hana, that road to Hana. Wow,
Oh, yeah.
just beautiful.
Yeah, we went to Hana when we were in fact, the funny story is we had to talk her parents into letting us use their car to go to Hana because they were like, "That's just so far to go." And finally, they're like, "Okay, if y'all wanna go over there for the day or
Yeah.
something." And it's a little bit longer drive. It's
Yeah.
really not that far by miles, but,
No, no.
it's nothing when you think, "Well, we're gonna go to Tulsa, and that's an hour trip,"
Right.
you know?
Yep.
We drive a lot further here.
Mhm.
Now, when you moved to California, what'd you do with your chickens, your goats, and cattle? Did you just say, "That time is over," or, "That period of my life is over for now," and you sold them, or were you
Yeah.
able to move out there and do anything with that?
Well, we sold the herd, so we had at that point, we transitioned to, like, some registered Brahmins.
Oh, yes.
We just loved that breed, loved how smart they were, and with how smart they were, it just made moving such a breeze. The moves were
Oh, yeah.
I would walk out there, they'd be at the gate handle. They'd identify, "Okay, there's the yellow gate handle, this is where he's gonna let us in," and they'd all be standing right there. Before work, I'd, lift up the gate handle, they'd walk, I'd close it behind them, and I'd go off to work. I had a little bit of, like, wet shoes as I showed up to, work out with my team, but no big deal. Uh,
Did you why'd you go with Brahmas?
well, it's actually we went to the state fair and we saw this, big old hump, big floppy ears, red, super slick coat, and my wife said, "All right, I'm that's the kind of cow I want." I
Oh,
want something
yes.
different. I want something a little bit different. And then we got to just know a few people in the area and just a neat community who were raising those registered ones. And again, the person, I mean, I could sit my daughters on top of them. They would
Oh,
just
yeah.
just stand right there. We could put a halter on it. I mean, they were just, it was a really, the temperament was pretty unique. I know some Brahmins, or as some people call them, Brahmers, get a bad rap for how spirited they are, high headed. But
Oh, yes.
I mean, I think that's the same thing with dogs too. Like really smart dogs that are kind of not trained are pretty wild dogs. And
Oh, they can be.
so I thought it was a good breed that, when worked with frequently, they were very fast learners, and we could bring
Oh,
in.
yeah.
So if I brought in other cows, they would train up. They just follow the herd of Brahmins around because they knew
Oh,
exactly
yeah.
where to go, and they'd follow you. They'd follow you anywhere.
I think I've told my wife I wanna get us some of these zebus that are
Mm,
pretty small.
yeah.
Of course, I probably shouldn't be saying this on a grazing grass podcast where we're talking about production, but
Mhm.
I think they're cool looking, and I think they'd be cool just to have out in my front yard
Yeah.
here, and
Yeah.
I could do a few things with them, and my wife doesn't like the way they look.
Mm,
So, she has told me no on those or Brahmas right now, so
yeah.
I'm working her that way because I remember my grandparents had a Brahma bull, I guess in the mid-80s, blue, and he was the tamest thing. You
Yeah.
could scratch on him and everything, and it just was amazing, except, as a kid and he comes running across the pasture to you, it's a
Mhm.
little scary because you don't
Careful.
know how it's gonna react, but he was dog gentle.
Yep. Yeah,
But
our bull would put his head right on my shoulder and just let me, that big old flap down by his, by his brisket. He just like,
yes.
"Oh, please scratch me." Like,
Yeah.
he was a big dog.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
We really like that breed.
Oh, yeah, very good. So you sold them out when
Yep.
you decided to make the trip across the country?
Mhm. Yeah, same thing. And really the chickens, and we kind of planned ahead, hadn't bought any hogs, and knew we weren't going to do meat birds again. So we just kind of closed up the shop windows, so to speak, and I thought we would just come right back. And so we didn't really sell anything other than the actual livestock.
Oh, yeah. So when you moved out there thinking it was a short period of time, you didn't look for a piece of land out there. You were thinking more
Yeah, I
short
mean,
term.
yeah, in Monterey, yeah, right. We thought 18 months, and then
Oh,
we'd
yeah.
go right back. And yeah, I think the medium price of a home in Monterey is something like
Oh, man.
900,000 for a fixer upper, and it's
I figured it was pretty high, pretty
yeah,
expensive there.
yeah, yeah, we weren't gonna do that. Yep.
So let's shift gears just a little bit, Eric, and talk about your project you have going on now. And that's our overgrazing topic for today, a topic where we dive deeper into. I'll just let you introduce it and tell
Mm,
us what it is, and then we'll go from there.
sure. So it just as we left off in our conversation about Monterey, I was at the Naval Postgraduate School, and they really give us a wide breadth of what we want to write our thesis about.
Oh, yes.
And so they're not gonna say, "Here's a" "pick out of a hat, here's your topic." They want it to be something that we experienced operationally, whether we were deployed or working with a partner force, something that we can give back to our community. And
Oh, yes.
so I always felt like when I was deployed, I could rapidly build rapport with my partner force. I don't play video games, but if I did, I always felt like I had a video game cheat code because I could talk about agriculture. I talk about, the
Oh, yeah.
majority of these places that we deploy to are agrarian-based economies. They're practicing
Oh,
animal
right.
husbandry. That's how they get by. That's their main source of income. So I thought there's something here that we could connect because a lot of the people I work with had zero background, no training on it,
Oh, yes.
and so I just thought again it was a bit of an unfair advantage that I had with my partner force. And so we saw whether I was, in Africa where we were able to work with the local grazers. For example, we had a range that we wanted to train our partner force on how to use these machine guns. And, but this grass is practically, chest high or over our heads. And they said, here's our range. And we said, hey, this is great. But, we're going to be laying on our stomachs. And we
Oh,
talked
yeah.
about our phases of training go crawl, walk, run. And so we're in the crawl phase with you guys right now. And so we need this to be, mowed down some. There's no mowers, clearly, there's no
Oh,
no
right.
John
Yeah.
Deere mowers out here. There's no flail mower. So ho is this something we could do? And they're like, "Yeah, give us a couple days. It'll be mowed down." And so we're driving by that range later that day, and there's those kids with sticks, you know, getting their herd of big cows, and they're mowing down the range for us.
Oh, yes.
And then, like, later on throughout that time, we're working with those same grazers to buy food for us, to sustain our team. So we just saw, like, kind of a cool, like, working relationship with the local grazers, we would call them ranchers here, and the military element that was stationed there. It
Right.
was
Good
work
synergy there.
Yeah, yeah, they work together. Like, they're like, "We can't exist without one another, or we can't do things well
Right.
without each other."
Yes.
So there was an element of reliance on one another that I thought was actually community building. It wasn't a distraction. It wasn't something that got in the way of operations. It actually
Oh, yeah.
helped it. And then as you know, the difference between coming out with a mower and mowing a range versus the difference in grazing a range, like, you're gonna get 2 different products there.
Oh, you are. Yes.
Okay. And so, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but, I'm here in California, and we're obviously concerned about wildfires. That's always a risk, right? We're always concerned about that. And even when I
Right.
was in North Carolina, we'd sit on a range, and if we're shooting and a tracer round hits a piece of oxidized grass, now I'm sitting on my hands waiting because there's a fire, and we have to shut down training. And
Oh, yeah.
so I just thought, I'm like, "Whoa, with this poly wire, with this level of control we have over these livestock, why aren't we grazing our installations? Why aren't we taking, a more holistic approach to how we manage our land here that ultimately benefits the warfighter, the trainer, like
Oh, yes.
we create more resilient landscapes that can withstand everything the unit's going to bring to bear. But back to the thesis talk is, we definitely saw like a link between these agriculture practices and stability. So my thesis partner, Ian McAlpine, I was super blessed to get a thesis partner who was smarter, better writer, better looking, all these things. That was a smart move on my part because he took our thesis to really another level. And so we looked at, how do we create stability in areas of instability through an agricultural practice like regenerative grazing. Mainly, we looked at adaptive multi-paddock grazing. That's really where
Oh,
we
yes.
focus. And then how do we do it on a DoD installation? Like could we go do it internationally? Sure. And there's a lot of people who are, but let's build it. Let's see who we need for a team, how we create it, and then let's do it here on one of our bases. And so that's really what gave birth to the our goal, the Regenerative Grazing Open Air Lab, that we're here on Camp San Luis Obispo in California. This is a California National Guard base. And we took an existing lease. That was those 140 cow-calf pairs that I'd mentioned. And, we talked to the environmental team. We talked to range control. They're the folks who run the training. They say, this unit is going to be on alpha range shooting this weapon system. These other units will be on these other ranges shooting other things. So we brought those two in and then got the garrison. So the kind of the headquarters element, the mayor, if you will, of the base, brought all those together along with the rancher who was grazing it, brought them all in a room and said, this is this is regenerative grazing 101. Here's what we'd like to do on this base. And then I looked over at the rancher. His name's Mark. I'd never met him. And I was like, we're funded. We can do this project, but without your buy-in, we don't do anything. This just kind of was kind of a cool opportunity that we didn't ultimately get to do. So he was great. He agreed to it. And then we took off running in September, starting the grazing.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you got this approved and you've got all the stakeholders together and coming up with a plan. And the cows were already there on a lease situation.
Correct.
And you converted, or the change was to go from a set stocking situation to amp grazing.
Right.
Did I summarize that correctly?
Yeah. I mean, they definitely did some rotation. This was, so there's 2,500 acres. So there's about 500 acre pastures.
Oh, okay.
And so, and Mark, he was a good stockman. I mean, he still is a good stockman and did a good job and didn't take it down to nothing. He definitely, we've had 2 awesome years, 2 great years of rain here. This year, not as great, which was not an awesome start to the project, to say, hey, we're starting this new thing and we're not getting the rain that we've had the last 2 years. Cause everyone was like, wow, last 2 years we had longer grass. I said, working on that. But correct, it was an existing lease. And what we want to get to is we're coming into contact with other bases, installations who say, hey, we don't have a grazing lease, but we see what you guys are doing and we're interested in also implementing something like this. Whether fuel load mitigation, we call it fuel load reduction, fine fuel load reduction, or invasive species. They'll say they want, some type of an animal to remove some of those. And so that's another model we're looking at.
Yeah. Is that where you see this going? If this works out good and it works for the DOD and it works for your base and it works for the rancher and it works for the land, is that what you envision? We have the opportunity to set the example so that other bases, other leases, they can go and implement this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. I mean, we're the proof of concept. We are were the test dummy. And I felt that way very much so as I was, scaling these cliffs with geared reels tied to my belt and, a rubber mallet trying to pound some of these fiberglass posts into the ground, because I was like, this has to work. I know this will work.
Oh, yes.
Well, I saw it in North Carolina. This has to work. I know it's a Mediterranean climate. I know things are different, but it's going to work here. I'm going to make it work here. And so one thing
Now,
that is unique is we are partnered with Understanding Ag, and so we have
oh, okay.
part of the contract is Understanding Ag does come here and say, hey, this is kind of the road to regeneration. This is the way we can apply it here. Here are some things that you've been doing that you need to do better. Or, there's a saying. I went to Ranger school when I was a young lieutenant, and they say that there's strong rangers and there's smart rangers. And I was being a strong ranger out there. There's nothing bad. It's not bad being a strong ranger, but
Right. Yes.
it's hard. And so, I didn't have
Yeah.
I couldn't tighten my belt anymore. We were working hard out here, and it was awesome. But that having someone come out, a second set of eyes, and say, hey, you could stick to the road here, utilize the terrain over here a little bit better, and let's tie into water over here was invaluable for my sanity and health.
As we think about life throughout in all aspects, whether it's grazing, our marriages, raising kids, I listened to a podcast called the Better Life Podcast with Brandon Turner, and he's all the time about coaches in different
Yeah.
parts of your life. And I think and I'm going to say this. I'm going to say, I think it's really important, and I don't have that in place. And I really should, I think.
Yeah.
But the coaches really help you because you're in the trenches.
Yeah.
And that's someone else to come in and have eyes on it. And they're using their experience and they're helping you see maybe what you're missing because you're in that trench.
Yes.
So I think working with someone is so important. Like I said, I don't have any in place, but I really should.
Mm. You're absolutely right. And I'll put a plug in. It maybe not a coach, but even just community who can, and that's why,
Just
like,
community.
you see, like, the Ranching for Profit with Executive Link. I mean, that's a really powerful thing. My wife and I, we do this thing called Reengage. It's like a marriage ministry. So
Oh, yes.
we're like always we've gone through this course 15. We're actually halfway through another one, about 15 and a half times. And it's like a 14-week course that we just go through repetitively because we just want to continually get better at our marriage.
Oh, yes.
You don't trip and fall and have a good marriage. So when you talk
Right.
about coaching and just being intentional, I think that's another thing. It's just
Being
being really
intentional. I like that.
intentional about what you want to see on your tombstone. How many hours a day do you spend working on, loving husband, father, friend?
Right.
How many hours of your day are committed to what's going to be on your tombstone?
This shows a definite weakness of me. I called my brother the other day, and he's like, or I texted him. He says, "Everything okay? What are you doing?" I said, "I am really terrible at maintaining relationships with friends, and I need to do a better job." And of course, it's my brother. I'm just like, so I'm trying to be a better friend here.
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh," he's like, "Actually, I agree. W- we all need that."
Yeah.
Eric, I want to jump back just a little bit to that when you had all those stakeholders in the room and getting started. How difficult was it to get their buy-in?
I really thought the environmental side of things was going to be the most challenging.
Oh, yes.
And that was not the case.
Oh, yes.
It wasn't. I mean, they're like, no, we understand how important livestock can be under proper management. I think that was
Right.
the crux of it all, and that's really what I was
Yes.
driving home was that, Fred Provenza will say meat is not meat is not meat, and it's like grazing is not grazing is not grazing.
Right.
There's a difference. When I'm out here, I'm the belly button, range control. Those folks I was telling you about who run the ranges, if a cow gets out or something like that, they're gonna call me, and I'm gonna ride out there in my four-wheeler and I'm gonna go get that cow off the range. The management is so different. It's personal. They know me. So that was it was actually a fairly easy, don't want to call it a sell, but
Right.
it's really what
But you are selling the
yeah,
idea.
we were selling. I
Yeah.
was a salesman in there. The one who I was really most nervous about was the rancher, was meeting the rancher,
Oh, yeah.
because he's a third generation rancher. He's got 1,000 cows. This is one of his, 7 different leases. He's
Right. Who are
Mark,
you telling me what to
yeah,
do?
who's this guy in this camouflage? He's trying to talk to me about cows. Like, I know cows. What are you doing? And really, I just can't. I talk to Mark, talk about maintaining a relationship with friends. I talk to Mark very free. I don't think we talk every day, but maybe every other day. We're
Oh,
talking,
yes.
and because I'm always I always want to try something new, something kind of crazy. And Mark's always like, "All right, I just keep kind of pushing. Like, for example, we have some areas that aren't typically grazed. They're outside of those 500-acre enclosures.
Oh,
There's some
yes.
down here we call it cantonment area, so it's like by the buildings, where maybe not training's happening, but maybe more like classroom type things are happening.
Oh, yes.
And so there's just some big, flat, wide open spaces. And I'm like, "Hey, Mark, can I get some of those older cows? Let me pull some of those down. I'll put them down here." And because I talked to the landscaping crew, and they think it'd be really cool to not have to mow that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and he's like, "Oh man, if those cows get out though, the highway's not that far." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, Mark. I just trust me." And so it's been really cool. And Mark, I'm not gonna say we haven't, especially during that training phase, when we brought all 140 pairs down in the training paddock, had the poly wire set up, had them on there in an acre and a half. And we're like, "Here's how we're gonna train with this hot wire. It's gonna be pretty intense for a little while." And I just remember him sitting there kind of being like, that's a lot of cows all mobbed up like this. And
Yes.
ooh. But again, I keep telling Mark, I'm like, he is the partner of choice. It has been awesome. I've learned a ton
Oh, yeah.
from him. So I'm really appreciative. But sorry, that's a long answer to that. What was it like being in that meeting?
Was there resistance from well, who gave the most resistance
I it
or what
honestly was,
fraction?
yeah, it was kind of the range control, because they were like, "Listen,
Oh, yeah.
we've had grazing out here. It's not broke. Why fix it? Now we're gonna have to kind of coordinate with you about where you're gonna be."
Right.
And I was like, "Hey, we actually will make it more predictable for you. I can tell you
Right.
you're gonna have pasture map pulled up, next to your computer on there. That'll be on one screen. Your other screen will have like what units are training and where. You'll be able to overlay those, so you'll know exactly what grid square the cows are. You'll know exactly where they are, because they'll be on this 8-acre paddock for today. Then tomorrow they're going to be on a different one, so we actually can work hand in hand, and we'll work a whole lot better together. There won't be as many surprises. We're going to be best buds."
Right. It's kinda like when I talk to hunters that's got land.
Mm,
They're like, "Well, cattle out there is gonna interrupt my hunting." When we're moving these cattle, they're only on a small percentage of their land,
that's right.
of the total land. They're not roaming over the whole place,
Hmm.
and I'm being very deliberate about where I'm having them go and what I'm doing with them. So, if there's a certain time you're going to be hunting in a certain area, we can make sure the cows aren't going to be there.
Right.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Now now that's a little they're always like, "Are you sure?" "Yeah, I got this."
Yeah. Just we can do this. Yeah. Yeah. And so when I meet with, I'll have people who are kind of sitting in a room, and I'm briefing. You know, I've done this a few times, talked to, AMP Grazing 101, here's how we do it on DoD land. And I see a few people with their arms crossed, and I'll say, "Hey, I bet you've been stationed somewhere where cows shut down your training," because
Oh, yes.
there are quite a few bases who do graze, and they're like, "Yeah, yeah, I was at one of those bases, and I don't think this is a good fit for, X
Mhm.
base that you want to do this at, because," I said, "We're not turning this into a dude ranch." Exactly what you said,
Right,
It's like, I know where they're gonna be. It's on our grazing plan, like, here's
right,
where they're gonna be, and guess what? If a unit needs to train in that spot and you don't want livestock there, we'll move them. We had a cool
right.
they have 4 legs. We'll we'll move them out. We can do that. It's pretty simple. We had a really cool story. The California National Guard was doing a best warrior competition at
Oh, yes.
multiple bases, and one of their stops was here. And so they they're running all throughout the night. They're not really sleeping much. They're shooting at ranges. And so then there's a land navigation portion. So they have a map and a compass and they got to find their way. And a friend of mine is kind of in charge of that portion. And I was like, hey, I just want to make sure we have the cows moved out before you guys before you guys go over there. What day do you want to have them out? I'll move them over here. And he's like, no, I think this would be a really cool proof of concept to see if we can do land nav and graze like in the same area.
Oh, yes.
And so I'm like, okay, I think it's a really good idea too, because the Army's tool traditionally is controlled burn. That's how you knock down vegetation in these areas where you can't put mowers in. And so we thought, well, let's do this at the same time. So during the safety brief, they're learning, here's how we navigate polywire. I showed them, here's the polywire.
Don't touch it or you will regret it.
That's right. Yeah, it's self-correcting.
It is.
And I showed them, you just step on it. You put your boot on it, you step on it, you walk in, you go find your point. There'll be some cows who probably look at you for a second, then they're going to put their head down and go back to eating. Don't worry about them. And then you'll walk out and it's no big deal. And so we did that. So they went through the whole night. No one got shocked to my knowledge.
Oh, well, good.
Maybe they didn't tell me.
They may have been a little embarrassed to tell you, hey, my funny bone hurt.
But no cows got out. No cows got out. So it's just a cool story of like, we're not only training, but we are like creating resilient training areas at the exact same time. Like we didn't need to do this huge, big shift. And a lot of folks will tell us like, okay, I think this could work in this area because there's no training over there. And I said, no. We can create the best training environments. We can missionscape. We can create areas that withstand or are better remediated, after a tank rolls through with a hooved animal than with whatever it is the money and mechanical intervention you're going to try and spend out there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. With going through this and getting it started, that warrior deal was something you didn't anticipate, but you all were able to work with that and get it working. Has there been anything going through that you're like, oh, I should have done different here? Or has anyone that had buy-in at the first, I know we're still fairly early, are looking at it saying, hey, that's not working as I thought it would?
Yeah, that's a good question. What is kind of right now, as I told you, we're grazing the impact area. So this is like where they're actually shooting. So instead of, and it's not typically grazed, normally it's just controlled burned, but we said, hey, can we graze that? Because it is continually burned. There's not a ton of forage out there, but what is out there is a bunch of like fillery and chicory. And so the cows are actually doing pretty well on it. And so we said, instead of fencing them and moving them every single day right now, we're just going to exclude areas where we don't want them to walk. So we have these target lifters that are solar powered. So a target will spring up for 3 seconds and then it'll go back down. And so that's the opportunity for the soldier to engage that target. And so those are all, again, solar powered. They don't want cows stepping on the solar panels. So included some of that. And that we came out the next day and cows are all over it. And I'm like, what in the world? How are these cows all over this area? We excluded them. And as I drive up there and get closer, those ringtails, it's like they saw those ringtail, we have those orange Gallagher step-in posts from Flex. We bought them for Gallagher step, and they shot them all up. I mean, it was pretty impressive. So the wire was all shot all over the ground. And we're like, okay, so the lesson here being, we need to do a little bit more standoff. These need to be a little bit further away from the targets. I don't think they didn't intentionally shoot them, but they were so close because I wanted every blade of grass that could be eaten.
Right. Naturally, as a grazer, we want to include every inch we can.
Every piece I could. And so I'm like, well, next time I think I'm going to have them. I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of grass
Oh, yeah.
and pull them back a little bit further. Because I was really priding myself in how we hadn't had cows walk onto ranges. We hadn't had cows
Oh, yeah.
who had disrupted training. And so when I mean, my stomach was just like in my throat as I
Oh, I
drove out
imagine.
there and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh no. Well, I mean, there's not much you can do for shot up poly wire, but it was a lesson learned.
It yeah. You learn from it and you move on.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I believe you're less than a year into the project now?
Yeah. We're 7 months. We're 7
7
months
months.
in.
How long does the project run?
Well, we wanted to go for 5 years.
Oh, okay.
But funding is always an issue, and so we're continually looking for partners and way to continue to keep doing this. We know, I mean, we talked to like Dr. Alan Williams, and we soil does need. We'll see changes, right? We'll see,
Oh, you will.
and we're
Yeah.
seeing some really cool stuff. I mean, we're seeing like this turkey flock that is just following these cows, and folks who have been here for 6, 8, 10 years, they're like, this is the biggest flock we've
Oh,
ever
yes.
we've ever seen. It's like 4 times the size. And then the rancher's like, I used to see deer like kinda out in the bushes, but I've never seen them out in the open like they're moving, It's like
Oh, yes.
they're following this herd as these cows go through and have some positive, disruption, and they're removing all that thatch and all. It's so that's been really cool to see. But,
Oh, very good.
he'll say, Alan will say, 2 to 3 years before soil really knows it's under new ownership.
Oh, yes. Yes.
We're having ecdysis, so Dr. Jonathan Lundgren and his team is gonna be out here to do a bunch of baseline measurements between I think in a couple days. Yeah,
Oh,
Sunday
very
they'll
good.
get here, we'll do Camp Roberts, and we're gonna do Camp San Luis Obispo. Pretty excited to have some baseline, and then we'll revisit those annually.
Oh, yes. Yeah. What's the future hold for you there? Are you going to be able to be out there through the whole project?
I hope so, as long as I can be. As
Oh,
long as the Army
right.
keeps letting me do this and lead this innovative range. Boy, yeah, we'll have to edit that part out. As long as the Army lets me lead this innovative range and land management program, I'll stay here and do it, 'cause I
Oh,
I
yeah.
I really see this as it could revolutionize how we maintain our training areas.
Oh,
I
yeah.
really
Yeah,
we don't
good.
fight on concrete pads all the time, We don't we do train in shoot houses, and we do that, but we do also need to train on a big open areas, and to me, this is the best
Oh,
way
yes.
we can manage these big open areas.
Yeah. Yes, I totally agree. You mentioned earlier you're using Pasture Map.
Yep.
How has that worked for you?
We like it. I was before, you have to pay for it, right? But so before
Right.
that, I was using Caltopo, which is
Oh,
not
okay.
great. I mean, it was a good, like, initial mapping, but
Yes.
it just doesn't track the historics. I mean, I don't even understand all of the good things Pasture Map can show you. But what was cool is they'll sit on the phone with you. They'll get on a Zoom with you and explain. They were like, I, my wife and I, we were trying to like move these pastures, and sent them in a email at like 10:30, because we get work done when the girls, when our daughters are asleep, right?
Right, right.
And at like 10:35, someone's replying with like how to troubleshoot adding in this line.
Oh,
I've been
yes.
really impressed with that their customer
Oh, very
service.
good.
Yeah, so that was pretty neat, and we do like it. I mean, that allows me, we have an intern from Cal Poly. His name's Miles. He's awesome, and that's like a super help because I can just pull out my phone and be like, all right, here's where we're gonna go today. Here's what the map looks like, and then we're gonna go out there and figure out if that's even possible. We have some challenging terrain out here, so maps
Oh,
are
yeah.
great, but you gotta walk it too.
Yeah. Before we move to our famous 4, is there anything we didn't talk about that you thought, "Hey, we should get that covered?"
Yeah, I really want to stress that like what we're doing here, is benefiting the military, but it's a systems, right? We don't look at linear reductionist science anymore, right? We want to take a systems approach.
Right.
And so, yes, it's benefiting the military undoubtedly. The warfighter is going to have the most pristine, well-maintained, well-managed training areas and ranges when we offer land access to folks who know what we're doing. Your listeners, we're preaching to the converted here. I don't think that's like
Right.
well, they're like, yeah, we get it. I've seen this on my landscape. I've seen how this reacts. Like, I can look at my neighbor's place and look at my place and go, what would be a better training area? Where could you actually drive a tracked vehicle? Where could people practice bounding and maneuver in a base of fire? How would we do that? Well, you'd want to do it. I'd want to do it at one of these ranches that are managed
Oh, yeah.
that way, you know? And so that makes sense. But then we also see the win for the rancher, we're seeing the animal performance out here. We're seeing just the temperament that's changing, which is really, really cool to see. And the rancher loves coming out here and seeing all his cows. They're right there.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
they're not all over. They're right there. And so that's been neat. And the environmental team is a big fan of this, because they're like, well, we have some cultural sensitive sites on our base that I can put a polywire around. So the cows aren't going on there.
Right.
There's there's a Choro Creek bog thistle. Well, we'll exclude that. We won't, that's a threatened and endangered species. You don't want us in there. This magic white wire will keep them out of there.
Right.
And so you're just seeing a lot of, and as I mentioned, like the landscaping crew, who the other day said, hey, we just really want to thank you for grazing around that area that's really challenging for us. We have to be up there with weed whackers. We can't be up there on a mower. So
Oh, yeah.
thanks for grazing that area that's historically not grazed. So we're seeing all sorts of these wins, and we're saving money. We're hopefully making the rancher more money. We want to see increased weaning weights. We really think this next year is going to be interesting when we see the conception or the breed up.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
typically those bulls, he's got 8 bulls out there that are working 2,500 acres collectively, whereas
Oh,
now
yes.
we had 8 bulls on 8 acres with 140 cows. It's like they're going to make their way
Right.
around to everybody, you know. So we're just
Yeah.
seeing, it's just been really neat.
And one thing I didn't hear mentioned there, which I know you're aware of, but whenever we're out there with animals that much, it just makes subsequent times that we're out there so much better because those cows are so calm
Yeah.
and tame versus cows that you go out and you check once a week from a pickup. It's just totally different
Yeah.
in their attitude towards you.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. They see us, and instead of turning and running, which induces stress, weight, they're not gaining weight.
oh,
They're running away from you.
right.
They just look at you, and then they put their head back down and start eating again. And I'm like, well, that's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love taking people out to see my cows because they're just so calm, and it's just a good relationship there.
Yeah. And then one thing we talk about is like, how do we, where do we go from here? And it's like, well, we see, I talk to, those folks like Alan Williams or Alejandro Carrillo or Roger Savory, who's like, I go out to these ranches and I'm Noble. We talked to Noble. I went to their land essentials class, and they're like, we go out to these ranches, and they're like, well, I get what you're saying, but I could use some help doing this. And so a lot of like what I've experienced out here and I've benefited from, I would almost feel selfish if I didn't say, hey, this is a great vocational rehab program for veterans.
Oh, yeah.
Like this, I can come out here, unless you've gone and moved cows to a new piece of grass and felt that, when everyone moves in there and they all just, there's a little bit of bawling as they're going through the gate, and then all of a sudden everyone's heads down and it's
Oh,
quiet,
yeah.
and you're looking around and you're observing. You're like, okay, did I overgraze that last one? It's only a 24-hour mistake. I'm giving them, I gave them 8 yesterday. Maybe I'll give them 10 tomorrow, and it's just kind of a really cool, your mind's always working out there. You're paying attention. Your head's on a swivel, especially if there's bulls out there, but I mean, there's just a lot of like healing that happens out there. And you're just,
Oh, yeah.
where I want to get to is that we take this and we can bring in veterans, leveraging the Naval Postgraduate Schools, the our goal, and we're bringing them in and training the next generation of not only just land managers, but I kind of look at the next generation of DoD land managers, so we can
Oh, yes.
continue what I'm doing, because just like you said, well, where are you going next? And I don't know, but this should outlive me, you know.
Oh, yes.
This is how
Yeah.
we could manage. And the first principle of soil health is context. And who understands the context of these bases better than my fellow veterans, who are like, yeah, I get it. These bases exist first and foremost for the warfighter. And I'm not the main effort anymore, but I'm a shaping operation, and I can help create the
Right.
best training scenarios for, those people who are serving after me.
Yeah. And that's an excellent point that we know, but sometimes we don't point it out. But in your context there, the most important aspect of that land is for training.
Right. Yeah.
The livestock are there just to help manage that.
They're a tool.
And like when we talk about technology is one of those things we love or hate. It depends on the day.
Yep.
But the goal of technology is to help you. And if you have to think about technology, I used to tell people this all the time. If you had to think about your technology, our technology is not doing good enough for you. It should just work. So in that context there, those livestock are just got to work for the soldiers, and they should be behind the scenes doing all the heavy work.
I know. Yeah. And I mean, I can keep pulling threads here, but I think about, have you seen those Friesla, those shipping containers that are USD inspected?
Oh, yes.
Shipping containers. Reese Lauder, I've got to know him, and him and his father run that. And I was like, this is what should be at every base. Not
Oh,
only are
yes.
they working to create training areas, but we're also closing the loop here, and we're making these bases a bit, they could island, and these ranchers
Oh, yeah.
now have direct market to these
Oh,
installations.
yes.
And we're feeding
Yeah.
nutrient dense food to our soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, guardians
Oh, yeah.
right here.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it and think about the future and think how we can do that.
Mhm.
Because that's what we all should be doing anyway, is bringing that food cycle loop. I'm sure there's a technical name that escapes me right now, but closer to home.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it Fred in his book, Fred
Provenza,
Provenza, thank you,
nourishment.
that, yeah, in Nourishment, talk about that the nutrients that cattle eat they're needed by the people who live in that area.
Right.
Because it's very local based. And I think maybe Daniel Griffith talks a little bit about that in one of his books as well.
Yeah. I mean, nourishment is a great read I'm sure most of your listeners know about it, but I really enjoyed that book. And Dr. Fred Provenza is also, we had like a speaking engagement, and I was like, oh, can any of the greats come do a speaking engagement in no time at all, like tomorrow? And Dr. Fred Provenza, I'd never met him. He just emailed me back the next day. He's like, yeah. Oh, what time you need me to show up today? And he did an awesome job. We had a DOD, like a working group, and he came in there, and it was
very
awesome.
good.
So awesome book, even more awesome person.
That's always good to know when you know someone, but then you get to know them behind whatever screen, whatever page you know them, and you're like, oh, they're even better in person.
Yes.
Now, sadly, we're not going to survey my guest on that because we don't want them saying anything bad, but we'll go ahead.
That's right.
Our famous 4 questions, Eric. Let's get started with them. They're same 4 questions we ask of all of our guests. And our first question, what is your favorite grazing grass related book or resource?
I know we just talked about Nourishment, so I won't say that one again. And I'm not going to blow your mind, but Dirt to Soil was pretty transformative for me. Not only, I was also in a unique place. I told you I was in Afghanistan reading it. So there's a lot of things going on in my head, and I'm like, the parallels are crazy here. But I really, really enjoyed that one, and that made a big difference. And I actually just read The Turnaround, a ranching story.
Oh, yes.
By David Brett. That was also a really good book too.
Yeah, both the excellent books. For Gabe Brown, he's close to where you grew up,
Hmm.
up north, so that helps out. Dave Pratt's book, I really like it. I'm not much on the fictional story to go with it, but it's so informational or, yeah, information dense. It's really
Yes.
nice.
Yep.
I mean, it's not a bad read at all, but there's some things in there you gotta read over on just about those numbers and
Yeah.
stuff as a primer for ranching for profit.
Yep. Yeah.
So excellent resources there, coupled with nourishment. Our second question, what is your favorite tool for the ranch?
You know, so I've listened to this, so I was prepared for this question, you know.
Right.
I would love to say, four-wheeler, polywire, but I remember my very first day, I just got selected to go to Special Forces Captain's Career Course. So
Okay.
they had a small group of us. There's about 12 of us in this room, and our small group instructor walks in for the very first day, and he walks in and he's like, "All right, lesson 1, always question the mission." And I was like, I was an infantryman, and you don't question it. It's just
Oh,
like
right.
you say, "Yes, sir," you move out, draw fire. It's like there's not a whole lot of leeway. And so I just remember thinking, always question the mission. What? So out here, I've just always been like, well, is this the best way to be doing it? I think I'm like always questioning. I
Oh,
just
yeah.
always have this mindset of like, well, I could probably be doing this better, or like just because we've been doing it this way for a really long time, does that mean it's the best way to do it? And that's how I kind of look at this land management, like how we've been managing this land for a really long, just because we've been doing it a really long time this way, is that really the best way we can do it? So I think
Oh,
my
yeah.
mindset, I think that really was transformative, and like how I look at a lot of things now was what that was a paradigm shifting that day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that would be. I like that because so many things we do for sake of tradition,
Right.
and really let's stop and make sure we're doing this for the right reason.
Right. Whenever someone says, "Why are we doing it?" and they say, "Well, that's just
The
the
way
way
it's
we've
been done.
done it." It should be like a huge like, "Whoa,
Right.
what?
Right.
What?" Yep.
Our third question, what would you tell someone just getting started?
It's I have had a blast. I think it is extremely fun, and I would say start I a lot of people say, like, "Start small," and I'm like, "Go for it." I mean, I get if we're talking finances and, if you're like, "Hey, I wanna just try this on 10% of my ranch to get started," I understand that. But if you have the means, if you have the desire, if you have the want, I think we should have big, hairy, nasty goals and go after them. You know, I
Well,
want I wanna do this on 26 million acres of DoD land. That's my goal. Like, that's what I wanna do.
right. Well, one book I've heard mentioned a lot in business circles, 10x is easier than 2x.
Mm,
And I've downloaded the audiobook, but I haven't listened to it yet. But yeah, that grand thinking, and he says in the book, based upon the summaries I've heard from other people, I haven't read
mhm.
it yet, that that it 2x just doesn't cause your mind. 2x is just doubling, and you're just going to continue what you were doing.
Right.
But when you 10x it,
Yeah,
you can't do what you're doing right now and get to 10x. You've got to change up some stuff,
that's right.
and it causes you to really think and reach.
That's right.
So, that may be a very valid advice that, hey, get started, jump in with both feet. And my wife will say, wait a second, you've done that too many times. But
I know.
maybe you should.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, maybe it's do the homework, but then, like, when you're ready to go,
Yeah,
you do it, you go for it. Like, go f
right, right.
don't
Take that
self-select.
action.
We always say, "Don't self-select." Like, don't let let someone else tell you it's not gonna work out, but you can do it if you wanna do it.
Right. And lastly, Eric, where can others find out more about you?
So we're fairly active on LinkedIn. That's really the one medium that I can kind of get around because it's me kinda out there. I'll quick stop the four-wheeler and take a picture of, the polywire as the drastic difference between grazed and ungrazed, and that always gets me excited, and I think other people wanna see that too. So, if they go on LinkedIn, and if you just type in "regenerative grazing open air lab," you'll you'll find us. Like we're the only one. Or you can look me up. I'm also on LinkedIn as well.
Well, Eric, actually, I have wrote down in my notes to ask you about LinkedIn because I don't use LinkedIn, but you'd mentioned your information's there and you're talking about it now. It makes me think maybe I should use it.
I
So tell me a little bit about LinkedIn and why that's your media of
right.
choice.
So I have found that a lot of the folks who I kind of keep talking about, like Alan Williams, Gay Brown, the Noble. I mean, they're on there. They're on LinkedIn. So you post something like I'll post a picture of something we did or a video of one of the moves I'm doing, and I will get real time feedback.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
Alan will send me a message. It's like it's kind of open kimono, right? You're kind of saying like, "Hey, this is what I'm doing. How's it looking? Here's
Right.
my thoughts on it." And it's a professional forum with the industry professionals, who can who you because they can't come out here all the time,
Right.
but
Right.
this is a great way to get and other folks involved, and people are like, I had no idea the DoD was implementing this. Like, how cool! What an awesome way
Oh,
to
yes.
ranges,
Yeah.
awesome way to, and they're professional. I mean, we connected with the USDA because of LinkedIn,
Oh,
because of
yes.
some of our posts. So I would highly recommend it just because it's not just like, I don't know, we're not trying to like influence people or like sell anything. I just want to get like these professional perspectives on what we're doing and what I'm seeing, and they give me real-time feedback, which has been
Oh, yes.
a gift.
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest. Earlier today, I would said I'm not getting on LinkedIn. There's no reason. But just your little 30-second speech on there, I think I may have to try LinkedIn and get set
Yeah.
up on there.
Yeah,
I
and you'll
just
you'll you'll see people with 0 ranching or grazing background who then will, like, say, "Hey, have you thought about this?" And I'm like, "No,
oh
I hadn't thought
yeah.
about that." Like, that totally could tie into storytelling or something that you just didn't even think about that you
Oh
can
yeah.
apply to your operation is pretty cool.
Yeah. I will have to look into that and get set up on that and try that out.
Yeah,
I appreciate the resource and your knowledge about it. Now, I mentioned to you at the beginning before we got started, famous for, and then there's a question
right.
afterwards. We're just started doing this just a few episodes in. It's your time to ask me something. So, is there anything you would like to ask me?
You know, what has been a initial struggle maybe that you found as something that paid off? Doesn't have to be an exponential payoff or anything like that, but something when you started was very challenging and you're seeing positive returns these days that would maybe be encouraging for others potentially. We'll see.
I don't know if this is my initial reaction to that question, my initial knee jerk thoughts on it. At first, and I think a lot of beginners struggle with this, is how much area to give
Mhm.
my animals today.
Yeah.
Because we all want to go out there and say, oh, we're giving, so I'm going to give 4 foot by 2 foot to this cow, and I have 100 of them. So I need 400 by 200 area. And there's some formulas to that to figure
Yep.
out how much grass you have out there, the density of it, how tall it is, how many pounds you have per acre. And then your cows, they're going to consume 2.5% of their body weight, depending upon what stage of production they're in. There's formulas to figure it out. But I think in the beginning for me, that was one of those analysis paralysis points
Mm. Yeah.
in that I just didn't know. Do I give them more? Do I give them less? Do I know I can calculate this. So here I need to go out and calculate it. And there's lots of benefits to calculating it and learning how to calculate it.
Yeah.
But for someone just getting started, I think that was a big holdup for me.
Yeah.
And once I was able to let go of that, and you mentioned this earlier in here, you make a mistake and you don't give those cows enough grass for 24 hours. You go out there, you see your paddock's grazed too short. Or maybe you wanted to do non-selective grazing. But even at that point, you've got to know how long you've had them in there. Those cows, how's the feel on them? Are they hungry? You have the opportunity to change that the very next day.
Yeah.
Or I say the next day, right there when you're out there for that next paddock they're going into. That error you make is just one time, and you have time to reflect on it and move on. So, I think we get wrapped up in the beginning on analysis paralysis, making sure we have it exactly right. In your context, my context, even if I do all the math, my pasture is not going to read those charts and say that's how much grass is out there. And my cows are not going to read that chart and say I'm eating 2.5% of my body weight today.
That's right.
So you got to modify that. And I think for me, getting over that hump of, it needs to be this, and being a little bit freer and letting my eye figure it out, and I don't have it figured out, but I can put cows there, and it's no longer a big worry for me. And I think that has paid off just in the amount of time it takes me.
Yeah.
It's paid off in my initiative to do it, because you get in that analysis paralysis. Rather than doing the step, whatever you need to do, you're thinking, I got to figure that out. Well, I need to look up the formula. Where do I find the formula? And then you wasted a couple hours because you're like, I got to get this all right. It doesn't have to be right. It doesn't have to be correct. That's why I like to say, just get started, go out there and do it. But I think letting go of that and then being able to use your eye, you're training yourself, you're training your cows. I think that's been the biggest payoff. And I don't know if that's a good answer to your question, but that's my initial reaction to it.
Well, it's your show, so I guess you get to say it's a good question. Good answer. I think it is. I mean, developing the grazer's eye, right? Isn't that what they call it?
Right.
You could be out there all day with your grazing stick and you're like, well, it's got to be representative, but this spot's a little bit shorter and this spot over here is longer. And whoa, this spot over here, I have way more bare ground over here than over there. And
right.
Yeah.
And I think different personalities handle that different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are very, and I don't even know what characteristic it would be. Probably my wife, being a little OCD, would probably not be good at doing that. So she needs a little bit of help. I struggle from trying to be perfect when I'm not going to be there. So that's where I'm struggling from, where some people don't have that. They have other things that's dictating what they're worried about.
Yeah, that's right.
We all have our issues.
That's right. Yeah.
Just we got to identify and work with them.
That's right.
Eric, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Cal.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Grazing Grass Podcast, where we bring you stories and insights into grass-based livestock production. If you're new here, we've got something just for you. Our new listener resource guide is packed with everything you need to get started on your listening journey with the Grazing Grass Podcast. It gives you more information about the podcast, about myself, and next steps. You can grab your free copy at grazinggrass.com/guide. Don't miss out. And hey, do you have a grazing story to share? We're always looking for passionate producers to feature on the show. Whether you're just starting out or have years of experience, your story matters. Head over to grazinggrass.com/guest to learn more and apply to be a guest. We'd love to share your journey with our growing community of grazers. Until next time, keep on grazing grass.